Bulletstorm Full Clip Edition is a bad game. I just want to make that generally clear. It has an incredibly simple gameplay loop and very little that sets it apart from other first-person shooters. The story and the characters are laughable, with the humor of an angsty 90s teen that can only be seen as cringy in every single way, a plot line that comes from an angsty action movie, and a setting that only serves as background destruction of massive set pieces that provide little context to what is actually happening. The characters are literal jokes, and my only hope was that this whole game was supposed to be ironic, but I missed the joke somewhere along the line. When you play a game like Broforce, you know that the game is purposely over the top in order to pay homage and kind of make fun of classic action movies and the characters within. This game does not do that. Instead, it creates a bunch of shitty characters and says, "Look, these guys fucking suck. Go shoot everything. Cool, am I right, fellow gamers?" The game loops around walking from room to room to fight one of 7 enemy types. In between the rooms, you might have something really exciting happen. Like, you might have to kick a door open. This happens approximately 73 times in the game. You might find a drop pod to get ammo or upgrade your weapons. This happens 84 times in the game. You might have to leash an object so that it falls. This happens 47 times in the game. Or you might have to perform an absolutely inspired QTE climbing section. This happens 22 times in the game. Whatever developer came up with the idea of hitting the triggers in sequence in order to gain skill points, you deserve an award for pushing the gameplay mechanics to the next level. Speaking of other stupid-ass gameplay mechanics, this game also features a look here OMG cam, where the game prompts you to look at something action or destruction related for skill points. Plenty of games have this mechanic, but for some reason it really got on my nerve in this game. Probably partially because the action continues around you while the action cam is happening. It can cause you to take damage or even just die, because they wanted you to see that giant monster that just knocked his penis into a tower. Haha, funny lol. That moment did not actually occur in this game, but it could have for all intents and purposes. Also, the action cam happened about 56 times in the game. I hope that I'm making it clear that the gameplay is incredibly repetitive. Even though the game is short and they vary the enemies that you are facing and the weapons that you have as the player, and you slowly face new enemies and get more weapons as you progress through the game, each conflict feels stale because the basic loop is exactly the same. The game prides itself on a glory kill mechanic, or skill shots as they call it. Problem is, these skill shots really don't take much skill. The challenge of the game is supposed to arise from attempting to complete those kills. What it actually boils down into is finding the destructive environmental piece and kicking or leashing every single enemy into that item. I'm confident that you could beat this entire game without firing a single bullet, except for maybe a boss battle or two, just by leashing enemies into the iron spikes in the wall or kicking enemies off the side of the level. And you can repeat that in every single room. The bosses themselves are uninspired, with one being a big monster, and another being a big monster. Another is a big plant. And I think there's also another monster in there. The final boss battle turns into a QTE, which really gives a lot of weight and importance to you as the character. The entire game is painting this evil General Serrano as the ultimate bad guy. And then you don't even get to kill him. Instead, you watch him get killed in a glorified cutscene. Pretty lame. And then you find out 3 seconds later, of course, that he's not actually dead. What? They include the classic post-credit scene in a sad attempt to set up a sequel that was never going to happen. The guns are supposed to be interesting and make the game stand apart from the rest of the first-person shooter genre, but the problem is there's only 2 guns that actually are interesting. The flail gun is 2 grenades that are attached with a chain and will wrap around enemies or objects and then detonate. That gun is legitimately fun to use, and the charge shot slices through enemies before exploding, adding extra damage to it. That gun seemed pretty creative and was really fun to use. It also seemed like the most powerful of all the weapons, so it became pretty much the only weapon that I used for the larger fights in the game. The other interesting gun was a sniper rifle, which was only interesting because of the bullet time mechanic that the game utilizes. It's basically like Sniper Elite, only you get to steer the bullet into the enemy. It makes sniping unique and different from the rest of the weapons, but it becomes clear relatively quickly that every enemy does the same dodge with the same animation, and the same timing, either to the right or to the left, which takes away some of the appeal and the skill of using the sniper rifle. The rest of the guns are pretty straightforward. Assault rifle, pistol, grenade launcher, shotgun, rocket launcher. Nothing about them really makes them stand out, even though their design is supposed to make them unique. The assault rifle is especially frustrating because of how many bullets it takes to kill an enemy. It takes the idea of bullet sponge to the next level for some of the enemies that you encounter, and you're better off just using the other weapons that provide you with additional skill points as well. I get the name of the game is called Bulletstorm, but it just seems like a little bit overkill. The mechanic that was supposed to differentiate this game from other shooters was the energy leash, a sparkling electric whip that lets you pull enemies towards you or off a ledge or into a cactus. This is entertaining and fun for the first 2 levels, but is not unique enough to cover up the generic everything else of the shooter, action, tough guy facade that this game creates. I think this game was supposed to be a response to Gears of War, but only with more humor. But instead, it feels so obviously forced that it just makes it painful. It is appropriate that Duke Nukem is part of this game. His gaming legacy died, and so should Bulletstorm too. After playing this game, it only made me wonder how it got a re-release at all. There have been several videos talking about remasters and re-releases that I really agree with.
Of course, some of them are just lazy attempts to exploit your nostalgia for money.
But here's some additional thoughts for what it's worth. I think it's too easy for companies to easily put out old, shitty games and make a quick buck than to create something new. The full clip of this game adds nothing to the original except for updating the graphics, but those still look like major dog ass. The characters' faces are especially horribly made. Remaking this game seems to only have one purpose: to attempt to drum up interest in a potential sequel. When that did not happen, it just got shelved. Somehow a Switch version was also released in 2019. And frankly, I just don't get it. Now, I'm clearly a sucker because I bought and played this game too, so don't think that I'm looking down on everybody else who bought the game. But how has there been 3 versions of this fucking game where the characters say things like this?
Yeah, the dance of death, mothers!
Really, going into it, I should have known this game was going to suck ass because Cliffy B worked on it, but I thought it might be fun. I was wrong. I also bought Lawbreakers, so clearly I'm a stupid-ass sucker. Do not play this game. Please, do not remake this game again. Do not make a sequel to this game. I see sometimes the game is referred to as a cult classic, or one that just fell by the wayside, like what could have potentially happened with Bulletstorm. That is not the case. This game should be forgotten. Somehow, in 2011, this game got an 84 on Metacritic. I'm going to assume that that has to do with the lack of concussion awareness prior to that year. All of those reviewers were high school quarterbacks who suffered from serious brain damage, and they were unaware of it. That is the only explanation for this game getting a score that high. Additionally, people like to tout the fact that Bethesda is a great company that makes great games. But I think that this game proves the fact that even though some companies make some good games, they aren't above also making easy cash grabs, like remaking a middling game from the last generation. Plus, I think there are some other examples that I can think of from Bethesda where things didn't go exactly well. Anyway, the game is bad. Don't play it. Instead, you should invest your time and money into new IP rather than playing something that was mediocre when it came out and still is 9 years later. Bye.